Hello everyone, this is going to be a video about rendering in layers. So if you've ever tried to render your scene and it's come up with that like red error that's like coda out of memory, or literally nothing happens, it might just be because your computer is trying to render too many objects at once for it to handle. So I'm going to show you how you can separate your scene into layers. Hi, Belly. So like little clusters, smaller clusters of objects, so it only has to render those smaller amount of objects at a time. This won't necessarily decrease render time, it's just gonna like allow your computer to hopefully render your scene if it is not able to do everything at once. So let us go. The first thing we are going to do is actually work up in our outliner, so that top right section. Right now I have everything under the same collection. If I click on Scene Collection and then go to the very top right corner, that little folder, let me close that so we can see. You can see I added a new collection. So I'm going to add a couple new collections because I'm going to separate my objects into the front section, a middle section, and a back section. The scene I'm doing this with is kind of a bad example because everything's kind of like in the same field. If you're doing this on a larger scale scene, you'll probably have like a defined like foreground and background. For your corner scenes, you might even have objects clustered on a desk as opposed to like bigger pieces of furniture that you can like cluster. So it's really going to depend on what the scene actually is. But for mine, I'm going to do front, middle, and back. And then I'm just going to separate my objects into those new collections I've added. So let me select my cupcake and the bear and maybe the spoon for the front. Just drag them in. And then if I uncheck that, it should make them hide. And then I'll do the vase and my fancy sticks and then the candle for mid, and then back I'll do the vase and that back cloth. So I have all of my objects now separated to these three collections. I'm going to keep all of my lights in one overall collection because they're going to be relevant for every like layer that I render. One thing to point out is, oh, not yet. After I do this thing, then I'll point it out. So now that I have these, I'm going to actually assign them to different layers. So kind of like how a photo editor has different layers to work on, Blender also has these. They're in the top right corner. Wasn't full screen. So it says view layer. This is just the default one. So I'm going to rename it to be front. And then I can hit that little piece of paper to the right of it, make a new layer. This one's going to be my mid layer, and then I'll do one more for back. And then that left icon, that like pile of photos, I can switch between my front, mid, and back layers. So now is what I need to point out, that these layers, you need to re-go and like set stuff in them. So my hidden objects for my front, since this is the default one that I was working in, the things that I want hidden are hidden. But now in these new layers, I have these pillows that I forgot about that are now visible. So I'm going to just hide my wanted objects and go in and really quick just delete my other stuff. I could just go in and hide these again, but for simplicity, I'm just going to delete them. And then double check that they are deleted in your back. Yes. So, I think it's just because I deleted them. They no longer exist anywhere. One other thing that you have to go in and change the setting for are any like render settings that you applied. So mainly the denoiser. If I go to my layer properties, you can see we have denoising data check marked, but if I go to my mid or back, it's no longer checked. So you have to physically go in and apply whatever like changes you made to each layer. And now that I have all my layers, all the layers checked, I have to actually say what objects show up on each layer. So my front, I just want my front object shown. So I could just check mark that box. You can also right click it. Under view layer, you either want disable from view layer if you don't want it shown, or enable. But that check box does the same thing. And then I always want my lights. So front, mid, I only want the mid objects. And then back, I only want those back. So again, I could do right click, view layer, enable, or the checkbox. So now if I hit render, it's going to do 3 renders, 1 for each layer. So if you have more or less layers, it'll do that many, and it's only going to render those objects in that layer. So I'm actually going to pause this render because there is one issue that I see. So I'm just going to tab escape. So right now, it is only rendering those front objects, but it's also rendering my background as a solid gray color. So eventually I'm going to have to layer my renders, and if it's treating the background as a solid, it's not going to render or layer them. It's just going to like cover it up with that gray image. So I forgot to checkbox one thing. So let me do that. I think it's under your render properties, the Nikon icon. If you scroll down, watch, it's not here. It should be film. My bad, I spag it. Yes, film. Okay. So under your render properties, under that film tab, if you check box transparent, then it's going to treat the backgrounds as transparent. And since this is render properties, it applies to all of them. But you can double check if you're paranoid like me. So now if I render, it should just like show those objects appearing, but keep everything else this like gray checkerboard pattern. So again, this isn't necessarily going to save render time because it still has to go through and render all the objects, but it will allow you to hopefully produce a render if it was getting overwhelmed with the amount of objects you had before. Okay, so we're finishing up our final render. I cut out the in-between time, but it did go through and rendered each layer. So the top right corner, I can go between them. This one's the front. I could show the middle or the back. So now what I want to do is to layer them, and that's going to be in our compositing workspace. So we actually have this, you have the front, mid, back, and we also have a composite view. So this is what the eventual image will be of us overlapping it. Well, this isn't going to be it, but we'll make it happen. So go to your compositing window. If you don't see anything show up, make sure you use nose. Use nose. Oh my god, I can't say that. Use nodes as checkbox. Oh my god. Okay, we're doing our best. I think if I switch off and then onto this, it'll show up. But it should have the front one showing up. I want all 3, so I'm just gonna duplicate this. So Shift-D, Shift-D, and then I'm gonna do top to bottom is gonna be back to front. So the very top one is gonna be back, and then the middle one will be mid, and then the bottom one will be front. Because this is going to be relevant to how we connect them into nodes, so we want to do the background first and then work our way to the front. And now is when you can see if you missed any of those checks box. If you missed the denoising data, if these aren't showing up. So I could go in Shift-D. Actually, I wonder if I can hook these up to the same denoiser. We'll do them separately. This is no time for experimenting. Okay. So, one other handy thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have like a sneak preview show up. So, if I do Shift A and then I think output, I can have a viewer. So this is right now hooked up to the composite. I can also hook it up to viewer and it's going to give me a sneak preview in the background. And if I hit V, I can zoom it out. I don't know how to zoom it in. I only know how to zoom it out, so don't zoom out too far. So we have our viewer. Now we have to actually mix these up. So it's only showing this one because that's the one I have connected. So what I need is a check alpha over. There's some other alpha that I get it confused with. Yeah, here's the other alpha one. So we don't want that one. We want the alpha over. So like over each other. So let's start top to bottom. And we are going to connect that back image to that top image of the alpha over and the mid image there. And now let's hook this up to our viewer to see what happened. You can see our vase and candlestick are over the other vase. If I did a swapped, we would only see our green background with that blue vase because it's going to block the other image. So this is where the order matters. Oh my gosh. Is there a hotkey to just like swap stuff? So now I have 3 images I have to combine, not just 2, so I just need another image alpha over. If I can remember what things are called. So this one we again want this to be the top because it's the back. And we want this to be the bottom, and then connect that to the viewer and the composite while we're at it. And it should make the little bear appear whenever it feels like it can. There it is. So if I hit F11, I can go back to my like renders. So again, I can switch to the composite view. And we have all of those layers together now. You might notice I have one major issue though, which is my lighting. I have light affecting all of the objects, but I don't have those objects affecting each other. So they're not casting shadows mainly. So I do want to show one thing to make that happen because right now it looks like horrible video game graphics. So there is one thing, instead of just like unchecking the things you don't want to be seen, we're going to treat them differently. It's called holdout. And it's going to use them like as a paper cutout and use that to cast shadows. So we still won't have like reflections happening if there's any like reflections between the objects, but we will have shadows, so it'll look decent. So let us go back to this screen and let's set stuff as holdout. So front, I don't need to set anything in front of it to cast shadows on it, so it's fine. Mid, I can have that front row cast shadows on it because there's probably a shadow happening on this face or something. So rather than just unchecking that front set or disabling them, I'm going to right click, go to view layer and do set holdout. So it like they're still visible in the viewport, but you can see they're treated as just like cutouts. So let's do that with a back view as well. So let us set both that mid and the front as set holdout, set holdout. And now if I render this, it will render these shadows. So let us hit F12 again. and it'll go back through, re-render each and every layer, but this time when it renders the layers where I have like set holdouts, it's gonna have like a like silhouette of the objects in front of it, and it should also be producing those shadows as it renders. Okay, so it went back, re-rendered each. Oh, wait, we spoiled it. So you can see for the ones where I have that set holdout happening, we do have shadows and we have like little cutout pieces. And because I have everything linked up in my compositing workspace already, I should be able to see my final render, which now has those shadows. So, yeah, that's how you would hopefully render if you ever get that pop-up that you're out of memory when you just try to hit render. So it's only going to do the bite-sized pieces at once. Just try to group them like intelligently into like what objects actually need to be near each other. And that's it. I'll see you guys next time.